Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Anime Brain Freeze. We are your hosts with modern-day minds in Stone Age bodies, or vice versa.
Depending on how you look at it, I guess. Hi, I'm John.
And I'm CC. And when there's just too much cool anime to watch, we got you covered. Today we have 3 widely different shows for you. First, I'll take a look at the down-to-earth sports drama Stars Align, which deals with the growing pains of teenagers, not only on the soft tennis court, but also in their problematic family lives. After that, John will review the second season of the anime series that's part of the giant cross-media franchise Granblue Fantasy. And finally, I will wrap up the show by talking about the new hit show from the pages of Shonen Jump that is all about applying its winning formula to the field of science yet again. Dr. Stone. Quite a colorful batch of shows to tackle, so let's get right into it. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back. Boys' soft tennis team of Shijo Minami Middle School is a joke. Vastly inferior to the successful girls' team, it is considered to be a pointless waste that is populated with lazy, entitled losers who, their team captain Toma aside, don't show any motivation actually achieving anything in their chosen sport. Due to new school regulations, the team is forced into action, however, because soon, all clubs that don't justify their existence by achieving some kind of displayable success will be disbanded. While the other team members quickly resign themselves to their fate, Toma is not willing to strike the club's colors just yet and starts a hunt for any possible new member that could revitalize their place. Hope arrives in the form of a new transfer student who turns out to be Toma's old childhood friend Maki. Through sheer willpower and on the virtue of being loaded as fuck, Toma convinces Maki to join the club. But unknown to Toma, Maki has very problematic family issues to deal with. And he isn't the only one. To overcome not only the challenges that await them on the tennis court, but also the many hurdles their personal lives put in their way, the club members have to come together as friends and stand as one true team. So Stars Align, or Hoshiai no Sora, subtitled with a light novel-ass title, even though it isn't, even in an ever-changing world, only the starlit sky will not change.
Wow, you're not kidding.
Yeah. It's very close to those kind of shows. But Stars Align is an original anime project with no other source material to speak of. And it is written and directed by Kazuki Akane, the acclaimed director behind series like Birdie the Mighty Decode, knowing Code Geass Akito the Exiled, and The Vision of Escaflowne. I think you have seen Akito the Exiled, John? I'm not sure.
Yeah, oh, geez. It's been a minute since I've watched it because I think it was like 4 or 5, like, it wasn't really movies, but, you know, they billed it as such that was released over quite a span of time, so
yeah, I think
it's been a minute.
I think Kazuki Akane is known as a perfectionist who doesn't really like to compromise when it comes to his vision, so it's no surprise that it took that long to, I guess, get Akito the Exile just right. But
I mean, it showed because Akito had incredible production values, so
yeah, so I've heard
it was worth the wait.
Some people said they like it even more than the original Code Geass. I can't attest to that. I haven't seen it yet. I always wanted to, and I might because we're getting more Code Geass anyway, if I'm not mistaken. So
something along those lines. It's been really weird because they had some new movies, I guess, and then there was Lelouch of the Resurrection. I don't know. I haven't kept a close thumb on the newer Code Geass stuff, so
yeah. But I'm willing to revisit that series. It had its dumb and moments, but I overall enjoyed it. So this might probably be a good reason to also check out Akito the Exiled then. And well. I might not have seen Akito the Exiled, but I love Visions of Escaflowne, or Escaflowne, I think that's how it's pronounced. It was one of my favorite shows from the 90s, and one of the good isekai shows, I guess.
What?
Yeah. Before it became super, overpowered character in a JRPG-ish world themed, like, all the shows we're getting these days.
Escaflowne was one of those shows I always heard, like, a ton about, but I never bothered to watch, so
It might be up your alley, considering also the show you're gonna talk about today.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's worth revisiting in my opinion. I've watched it through like 2 or 3 times, and it still holds up. Ending is maybe a bit unsatisfying because it feels a bit open-ended, but it's still like, I think it wraps up all the most important stuff. I liked it a lot. And I also loved Birdie Decode, both seasons. I think that's a great sci-fi show, and I'm still mad that we haven't gotten another season yet. But yeah, so after finding out that Stars Align was gonna be completely Kazuki Akane's baby, I was quite intrigued. Looking at the basic plot summary, this seems to play a bit outside of his standard genre ballpark, since most of his acclaimed stuff is sci-fi or fantasy material. But hey, I like sports anime, so I was totally okay with the setup for his new show. And the show is animated by 8-Bit, a studio that is known for regularly acquiring new talent and investing in new tech, a thing Akane seems very much down for. And Stars Align is a very ambitious project, not only, but definitely when it comes to its animation. Aside from the constant detailed character animation, there's also a lot of combination of 2D artwork and 3D backgrounds and camera work. And it mostly looks good to great, in my opinion. The matches especially contain some fancy tracking shots and fluid character movements. It does not look as mind-bendingly insane as the badminton matches in Hanebado, which seems like a good point of comparison, considering how similar those two sports are, kind of. But it's at least visually engaging and creative. Sometimes the overly ambitious goals can lead to the animators visibly struggling with like keeping up a consistent level of quality in every scene.
Oh.
Especially when it comes to the character models and combining certain 2D with 3D techniques. Like, things can occasionally get a bit rough, most noticeably towards the end of the show. There are other reasons for that too, but you know. But I still don't really have anything to complain in terms of presentation here. What really stood out to me was the detailed and nuanced facial animation of the characters, especially in emotionally distressing scenes. In comparison, all the rough moments are super negligible, in my opinion. The soundtrack is by a band called Jizue, which I haven't heard of before, and that's also fantastic and complements both the action-packed matches and emotional moments of the show very well. Like, be they high melodrama or somber, quiet, melancholy moments, both is equally well underscored by the soundtrack. There's a real cool fast-paced piano rock track that plays during pretty much every match in the show. Maybe even a bit too often. Might get old for some viewers more quickly than for others, but I liked it a lot. I think it's just a super riveting tune.
It's one of those sorts of songs where they were so proud of it that they have to keep. I remember Yu-Gi-Oh! GX was like that. There was this one awesome tune that they played in the first episode. I was like, yeah, this is dope. You know, really high action song. And then they kept using it over and over. It's like, guys, you know, this song's cool, but you know, the rest of the soundtrack's not bad either.
Yeah, it outwore its welcome a bit by the end, but I still liked it. I thought it was like, it's just cool once it starts up. It's like, holy shit, now things are gonna get real. Now, on the surface, this is a show about soft tennis. And I gotta be honest, even though I like sports anime a lot, tennis was always one of the most boring sports in existence to me. And don't get me wrong, as usual, anime makes the most boring thing at least borderline exciting. Like I said, the animation during the matches is mostly great. There's a lot of shit happening. But with this one, it's more about rooting for the characters because the show got you to care about them rather than what's on display during the matches being the engaging thing here. At least for me, people who are really into tennis might be more dialed into the back and forth, but for me it was mostly about the characters overcoming their boundaries, evolving, and seeing them becoming better versions of themselves during the matches. Which is, you know, always a storytelling tool in sports anime, was like characters with different ideas, different ideologies, whatever, and different attitudes clashing, and then evolving through that, even if they don't directly speak to each other or have a direct exchange aside from the sports thing. Stars Align does that too. And, you know, also evolves the relationships between the team members at the same time. And speaking of boundaries, Boy, there are a lot in this show when it comes to the characters. Akane gave all the members of the club extensive background stories, and there's a reason for that, since almost all of the club members share a common theme when it comes to their family backgrounds. Their parents suck major ass.
Well,
a theme we've also been acquainted with in another sports anime show that I mentioned before, Hanebado, where, the main character has one of the worst anime moms in history. And there's this version of that in this show as well. And that is, or several versions actually, like a bunch of variations on that. And nowhere is that more obvious than with our main character, Maki, who lives alone with his mom. He does all the chores, the shopping, the cleaning, the cooking, what have you, because his mom is out there making sure they have a solid income, which, funnily enough, seems to be the reason why he is athletically gifted, because they didn't have an elevator in their old apartment, so he did a lot of running up and down the stairs and other things. He actually isn't into sports. When we meet him the first time, he's more a math and astronomy guy, funnily enough, but due to aforementioned circumstances, turns out he's not bad at sports either. And Toma, his old friend, immediately recognizes that when Maki displays good enough reflexes to catch a stray kitten in midair when it jumps over his head. So he tries to recruit him into the club, naturally. But after some back and forth, and Toma actually doing some investigating, Maki is basically like, hey, sport clubs are expensive. My mom is a single earner for both of us. If you want me to join to save your club, pay up. And Toma immediately does. Because his family seems to be quite wealthy, he just says he'll throw 10,000 yen Maki's way each month. And if they win the tournament, another 10,000 as a bonus. And Maki is completely taken aback because he didn't actually expect Toma agreeing to these ridiculous terms. I mean, why would he? But Toma does, so here we are. And he also supplies him with all the necessary gear as well, so that's quite a good deal for Maki. And it turns out it was the right move for the team as well, because Maki is a real upgrade to the club. Not only does he turn out to be super adept at learning the basics and becomes very good at the sport very fast, Maki also isn't afraid to speak his mind either, which turns out to be more beneficial to the team than you might expect initially. He calls out the other guys several times for being bad at tennis, like saying, if I can just beat you like that, what have you been doing until now? And he is not wrong. He's definitely blunt, bordering on rude sometimes, but in a cool way, I think. And that not only pisses some of the players off, but also motivates them to show him that they can do better. The soft tennis teams at this school also play only in doubles, and Maki quickly realized that the current pairing is one of leaders and lackeys rather than good matchups that complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. I guess because he's into math and astronomy and stuff, or maybe that's why he is into math and astronomy stuff. He has a sharp and analytical mind, but he's also quite empathetic, and both those features benefit him and the team very much. The new pairings he comes up with actually work true miracles for the team prowess when it comes to the competitions. The new teams actually work so well together that they come up with their own little strategies before and during the matches, which comes into play in later tournament and stuff like that, and it's really engaging to watch. And it's nice to see these characters, after being egged on by Maki and being fucking pulled out of their lethargy. It's just nice to see them evolving and becoming better players and enjoying more what they're doing. It's also really nice to see Maki really getting into something he had no interest in it at all before. He even starts up writing strategies during math class, which is his favorite class, so that means a lot, I guess. I also mentioned him being empathetic before, and there are several examples of that. Some of my favorite relate to a friend of Toma named Yuta. Maki immediately realizes when meeting Yuta that Yuta has a crush on Toma and tells him that it's totally fine to be gay. Just like in Given, right? Mm-hmm. Where there's this key emotional moment, that's also in here as well. He's basically saying to Yuta, just like who you like, it doesn't matter what other people think, you do you. And he also makes him the manager of the club, which is also nice. And during a later episode, they also have this incredibly down-to-earth and candid discussion about how Yuta is still trying to figure himself out. If he wants to be a boy or a girl, because he might or might not be trans as well, what he feels comfortable with right now, what his expectations and fears are. They actually show a flashback scene of Yuta reading an LGBTQ-themed book, and Maki manages to take away some of Yuta's worries by telling him about a good friend of his mom who was born a woman and then transitioned to being a man, and how much more confident and comfortable his mom's friend now feels in his life. But he also tells him that Yu doesn't need to rush a decision and instead should do things at his own pace instead of letting the world or social doctrines force a decision on him. And that discussion is so refreshingly earnest and open-minded, and Yu pouring out his heart and Maki admitting that he can't fully comprehend what it's like to be in the situation, but that he deems it important to put oneself in the other person's shoes. That's just so unusual in anime, and it's encouraging in regards to those kind of themes being handled in that medium in the future, at least by certain writers and directors. And I really like that. I didn't expect that to happen in this show, I guess, and it was just one of those very emotional, very nice, very down-to-earth scenes that felt very realistic with really good, well-written dialogue. It also says much about the author of the material, I want to say, who I've gained even more respect for now. And hey, Maki also likes dogs.
Hey.
A generally good dude, as you can see. A really likable, down-to-earth main character. I really like Maki a lot. I think he's fantastic. So, yeah, things are really looking up for everyone, aren't they? Well, remember how I said that Maki's family life was really problematic? It's not his mom, because she is super cool. It's his piece of shit dad. Turns out Maki's dad abused his son through most of his childhood. Beat the shit out of him, basically. His wife too, probably. So eventually Maki's mom got a divorce. But due to a fucked up legal loophole, since he's Maki's biological dad, he is still allowed to know where his son lives. Maki's mom has already filed a restraining order, but that hasn't run all the way through the labyrinth of blocky bureaucracy yet. So asshole dad is basically free to look them up every time they move, come to their place, steal some of their money, and also abuse his son while he is at it. Maki's dad is definitely a contender for worst anime dad in history. Not only has he, and still is, physically abusing his son, he also psychologically tortures him by trying to make him believe that Maki is gonna end up being just as much a worthless piece of trash as his father, because he has his genes. To see Maki instinctively cower in fear and shield himself from harm when his dad raises his hand against him is heartbreaking and incredibly rage-inducing at the same time. His dad really is a scumbag to rule all scumbags, that guy. Truly despicable. And the show really pulls no punches when it comes to these moments. It's especially disturbing when we have a heartwarming bonding scene between Maki and one of the other characters, with a riveting, hopeful score in the background, and then sudden silence, and you know, this might or might not turn into an absolute horror show in an instant. That being said, now that Maki is not alone anymore, things start to change. He actually confides in Toma, which leads to one of the most kick-ass fuck yeah moments I could have hoped for. I'm not gonna give it away, but it was incredibly fist in the air, pumping, satisfying, and heartwarming at the same time. So I'm glad that happened. And Toma's family life is not free of conflict either. He and his mom kinda hate each other, or at least his mom hates him, because he's not like his older brother Ryoma. Some of that might have to do with Toma being very introverted and antisocial, which he struggles with on a regular basis. But he is also, in general, a very intense guy. He often comes across as very brash and strict when it comes to the other club members and being the captain of the team. Outside of that, he doesn't talk a lot. And as an example, Thomas is actually incredibly pissed when he and Maki win their first couple of matches against the other club members. He lashes out at them because he considers them either lazy bums for not being able to beat someone who never played tennis before, or idiots who are too focused on trying to make the newbie look bad instead of actually playing good matches. I mean, he's not wrong, but he is also very frustrated with himself, obviously, because he considers it his duty as team captain to motivate and build up the other players, which in his own eyes he completely failed at. Not only does his mom compare him to his brother constantly, he does it himself, because Ryoma was a soft tennis player as well. He actually took the team to the nationals when he was in charge, and since Toma looks up to his brother, he tries to constantly live up to that giant idolized version of his brother, and punishes himself every time he doesn't succeed in that. And there are a bunch of other characters, too, who struggle in this show, like pretty much everyone of the main cast. I mean, you can probably already imagine what struggles Yuta has to face for being at least gay and possibly trans, bullying being the least of it. But there's also Rintaro, the vice president of the club, who is adopted, which makes him feel like he will never be able to live up to his parents' expectations, even though they love him with all their heart. Another dude named Nao, his mom is an overbearing helicopter parent. Another club member, Itsuki, lives alone with his sister, I think. At least his parents got divorced. And actually his full background story is pretty damn horrifying. Kind of even worse than what Maki had to endure. But I won't give it away. And there's a scene where some punk at school makes fun of him for his family situation. And Itsuki actually caves his forehead in with his tennis racket. Ooh. Which is a great but also unsettling scene. I mean, he doesn't kill the guy, but he gives him a nasty cut. There's a lot of blood. Then again, he and Maki actually bond over that, because, Maki has a troublesome family life as well, and that guy makes fun of Itsuki and his sister living alone with their mom or something, and Maki can relate, and he's like, yeah, fuck that guy. But also, you shouldn't hit people with your tennis racket. It's broken now. Like, that is the worst thing. So that the guy got a fucking hole in his head now, but that the racket is broken. And I had to laugh at that. It's like, it really fits like Maki's blunt character type. It's cool. And then there's one of the few main female characters in the show, Kanako, who lives next door to Maki and starts hanging out with him, Yuta and Toma. Mostly because she seems to have quickly developed a crush on Maki, but also because Maki is actually really good at cooking, since he is responsible for all the chores while his mom earns the green. So naturally, Toma, Yuta, and Kanako start just hanging out at his place regularly, just to experience his cooking. And Kanako is actually an artist. She seems to have drawn mostly manga-style stuff till now. But watching the boys play tennis and analyzing their body movements actually gets her interested in further developing her techniques, tool sets, and range when it comes to drawing characters. Which is cool. But her mom doesn't support her art, though, because she thinks that it's not a valid career path, so it's worthless in her eyes. And Kanako initially at least has a crowd of followers online, but once she changes styles and tries to actually evolve as an artist, those vapid shitbags turn their backs on her, of course. So she also has a lot to deal with, but also finds strength in seeing the boys becoming better at their sport, even if she was one of the people who considered them total losers before all this. So she's like, hey, if they can do it, I can do it too, which is great. And she's right. So I hope that continues for her. So yeah, a bunch of family drama in this show. And don't get me wrong, not all of the parents are assholes per se, but there definitely is some bad parenting going around, like physical abuse, psychological abuse, not understanding your child's needs or putting your own needs first, seeing your child as your possession, or trying to fulfill the dreams you had for your own life through your child without questioning if that's actually what your child wants or needs. A lot of parents in the show fuck up their kids in various ways, but there are also some good parents too, of course, like Maki's mom, Shingo's dad, or Rintaro's parents, so it's not all black and gray. And despite some scenes of heightened melodrama, all the characters and their problems in this show felt incredibly down to earth and super real. I mean, if you want to talk about a show getting real, as they say, this is it. Doesn't get more real than that. Some viewers might feel like the constant barrage of shitty parents and personal problems of the cast is a bit too on the nose, or over the top, or exaggerated, or unrealistic, or whatever, but it didn't feel like that to me. I was engaged from beginning to end, completely dialed in, more into the character drama than into the sports competitions, actually. Although that part is great too, definitely. The only thing worth mentioning, in my opinion, that didn't work out sometimes for me when it comes to drama is that certain emotional moments should have been given some more time to simmer and room to breathe, in my opinion. Because sometimes the show cuts away too quickly from a huge revelation or some character breaking down or something. But again, the few moments that stuck out to me in that regard are small in number and very negligible. So it's fine. It's totally okay. But yeah, I loved pretty much everything I was watching. The intensity of it all had me super hooked. And then after the first big tournament ends, a bunch of things go wrong. Shit gets super dark. And after one of the most what the fuck mouth wide agape moments in the show, it just ends.
Oh no.
Yeah. So here's the deal.
When that happens.
Here's the deal. Stars Align is 12 episodes long, but it wasn't supposed to be. It was produced as a 24-episode series.
Oh, did it just get cut off in the funding and it got canceled, or is it a split core, or?
Until spring of 2019, months before the broadcast and years into a production that's easily traceable into 2017, the team got notified by the production committee that the series would now only be one core of 12 episodes.
Oh, that sucks.
Mm-hmm. To quote directly from a very informative article on Sakuga blog, which I will, as usual, link in the episode description. By that point, so much work had been done already that a fundamental restructuring of the show wasn't a real option. So they opted for the lesser evil of telling half the story more or less as they'd intended it. The result isn't the Stars Align that Akane and company had envisioned, and not even the abridged version they could have made if they'd been notified about the length much faster, but it genuinely feels like the best they could do in these frustrating circumstances. And this is a huge bummer, not only because we end on a giant cliffhanger with most of the character story threads left dangling without any real resolution whatsoever. Some characters that were obviously intended to play a bigger role, judging from the ending animation and stuff like that, like the student council president Kinuyo, have been barely featured in the story so far at all. And also, because the team was left operating under the assumption that they would be able to realize the vision of the writer/director as they intended to, and weren't even given enough notice in advance to steer things into a different direction. I think that's super shitty. I really, really think that was a bad choice on parts of the production company, and if money is the reason for that, that's understandable, but still garbage. Like, fucking give them... I don't know, a notice much sooner, guys. What the fuck?
That's business, though. It sucks to say, but it's business.
Yeah, I guess.
Who knows? Maybe the viewership was good enough that maybe someday they'll be able to turn around and say, hey, yeah, maybe you can, finish it now, but...
Yeah, we'll see. In the last episode, the OP is actually ending abruptly, which never happened before, which is probably an intentional nod to the whole situation. Since it mirrors what happens to the actual show, the ED does the same thing in the final episode. And I can't even imagine how frustrated the director must have felt to have this, like, his passion project cut short, which this obviously was. Like, this felt like a very personal story that he wanted to tell the way he wrote it up, and now he wasn't able to. I don't know why this happened. Maybe because the production got too costly. There was also rather unfortunate or dumb, depending how you look at it, controversy about the ED of the show, because the key animator copied the dance routines of some famous Japanese online dancers without asking them for permission first.
Oh, I think I remember seeing something about that.
Yeah, that got big media buzz for a while. So the production committee and the crew had to come out and apologize for that oversight. And that kind of colored the show in a bad light afterwards. Maybe that soured the grapes on the side of the production committee as well when they had to think about giving it a second core. I don't know. But then again, like, they already notified the team that the show would only get 12 episodes in spring of 2019. And that shit with the ED happened after the show started airing. So it was like, I don't know, half a year between that. So I don't think that this clusterfuck happening was the initial reason to cut the series short. It couldn't have been. But it might be the reason why it doesn't seem like it will be getting a second core. So, and the director, Akane, has since come out and said that he intends to finish the story in line with his original vision one way or another. The problem is we don't know when or if that will actually ever happen. I mean, shows have changed production committees and studios between seasons before. That isn't unheard of. But I don't remember any case where that was beneficial to the show in question in any way. Like, I can only think of bad examples of that.
Yeah,
like One Punch Man, for example. Now, recently, Seven Deadly Sins. I think Log Horizon, that also happened to that show.
Yeah, it switched from Satellite to Dean. And after the author got out of jail for tax evasion, the third season is still being handled by Dean. So,
So, that doesn't really get my hopes up for getting like another season of this caliber. I mean,
maybe if the people at 8-Bit are still on board for it.
Yeah, which, you know, why didn't you just fucking give it the 24 episodes to begin? I mean, Akane might also try to finish it as a manga, but again, that would be a bummer because I'd rather see this finished in animated form because, like, the production values on this were great and it looked good, it sounded good, it just did all the right things when it came to highlighting the emotional moments, and I think, you know, the story material would really profit from this being continued in animated form. But as things stand right now, this is a great series that I can't recommend. Because it's completely unfinished. It's thoughtful, it's heartwarming, it's disturbing, it's packed to the brim with sports action and engaging from beginning to end. But you will get no final payoff to a lot of the interesting character stories set up during its runtime. And trust me when I say it really ends on one of the worst cliffhangers I have ever seen and you could ever imagine. If you want to watch it, it's on Funimation and Hulu in the US, on Wakanim in Germany. Content-wise, I can wholeheartedly recommend this show to anyone who likes sports anime. Likes really well-written characters, likes good dialogue and great drama, and is fine with things getting too real for comfort and a bunch of story moments. Just be aware that if you decide to check out this otherwise truly well-crafted series, you won't see the characters' personal journeys come to a satisfying close. As much as it pains me to say this, maybe wait until we get the unlikely confirmation of a second season or until Kazuki Akane finds another way to finish this touching story the way he intended to.
Right, so that means it's time to talk about Granblue 2 Electric Boogaloo. I know that subtitle's overdone, but I'll never not love that joke.
You have no restrictions on that, no limit.
Yeah. So, second season of Granblue Fantasy. What's the story? So, obviously, this is a continuation of the story from the first season, which we talked about. God, it'll be about 2 years now, I think. So, now... On the run from the Erst Empire, Gran and the crew of the Grand Cipher receive an offer to negotiate a ceasefire. Meeting at the neutral territory of the Albion Citadel, they are welcomed and hosted by Vera Lilly, current Lord Commander of Albion and a friend of Catalina from her officer training at Albion. Imperial General Furious grants the Skyfarers an official pardon, but fails to defuse the tense situation. Given time to unwind, the Skyfarers attend a gala hosted by Vera to celebrate the arrival of the crew. However, tensions run high as Furious and the Erst delegation remain at Albion even after the negotiations conclude. Learning about the existence of a primal beast on the island, the crew is shocked to discover a letter from Catalina announcing her resignation. While Gran heads off to find their former comrade, Eugen and Rackham decide to investigate the Imperial presence on the island, suspecting a more sinister scheme lying up the Empire's sleeve. So, like I said, this is the continuation of the story from the first season. The first season covered chapters 1 through 16 of the game, and meanwhile the second season basically jumps right back in at chapter 17 and continues on through chapter, I believe, 28, 29 through 28. Which, needless to say, is still only scratching the surface because as of the game's latest updates, there are 132 story chapters that you can play through.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and it's funny because I opened up the game and I logged back into my account for like the first time in like, Jesus Christ, I don't know how long. And it's funny because my account was right at the chapter where this season starts. So, I stopped playing at just the right point, I guess. You know that thing we were talking about earlier about switching production companies?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the first season was headed up by A1 Pictures, and you know, we say things about A1 a lot because their productions are kind of uneven, I guess is a good way, is a diplomatic way to describe it. They switched the production of the show to Mappa, who we've talked about several times before, and we know they're capable of doing good work. And boy, this is. I don't think this is the worst work Mappa has done, but it's far from their best, man. It doesn't really look good from the onset, mostly because immediately the character designs are different. And I don't think that's a positive or a negative, but if you've seen art from the game, a lot of it from the early game anyway was done by a man named Akihiko Yoshida. And if you know him, you're probably familiar with some of the other games he's worked on, like Final Fantasies 12, 14, Tactics, Vagrant Story, Bravely Default, Nier Automata. So you know the art style. You know his art style probably pretty well. And the first season did I honestly think, a real good job of capturing that. Like the very sort of rough-hewn, almost sort of sketchy look of it at times.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I had to, I didn't watch the first season. I watched like 1 or 2 episodes, but that art style just stuck out to me because it was unusual, and I wasn't really into it in the beginning. It was like, this looks weird. This looks a bit unfinished, maybe. But I didn't really get it at that point in time because I didn't know who was behind the actual artwork, and it just looked a bit weird to me. But yeah, it was definitely distinctive, and in retrospect, I think it's cool that they actually managed to bring that style across so well in the first season.
Yeah, and it really hit it really well. And then this season hit, and the characters look like they're from generic early aughts anime, and it's not great.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, I look at it and I'm like, this isn't terrible, but it's not what we had before, which is saddening to me because about halfway through this season's run, I don't know if there was something held up on the production side, and they were just like, throw in this OVA episode here, and it was an OVA episode from season 1. So we got this nice little style whiplash over the course of 2 episodes. It was like, oh, I remember how this show used to look, and then it went back, and it's like, oh yeah, it looks
Seems
like this now. Huh?
Very ill-conceived in terms of placement of this episode.
Yeah, it was like, here's the Halloween-themed episode. Okay, cool. Like 3 weeks after Halloween.
Mm.
But yeah, it was just like this. I don't even know how to describe why or the why, the how they decided to put that episode where they did, when they did. It was just like, great, you're reminding us of what used to be. It's kind of going back to what we just said a few minutes ago about Log Horizon. every time they would flash back to scenes from the first season. It was like, yeah, I remember when this show used to look good because Satellite put in the work, and then you'd immediately be snapped back to reality when you see Dean's animation work, and it was like, oh. And I know you will eventually have things to say about Dean later on, but
yeah, whenever that happens,
yes,
when I can force myself to torture myself.
But yeah, I mean, I guess at first the animation seems a little off in the first year. Like the first couple episodes are not a good showing. But then it's sort of, I don't think it really gets like really great, but it gets a little better as things go on. So I guess, I don't know, the show, it was an entirely different, they didn't bring anyone over from the first season's production crew, except for the musicians.
That's something, I guess.
Yeah, because the music, we'll at least talk about how fire the music in Granblue Fantasy is, because the game has awesome music, mainly composed by one Tsutomu Narita, who has worked obviously on the original game, the upcoming Granblue Versus.
I was about to ask that. Is he going to do the music? Is that from him as well?
Yes.
Nice.
He did some work on FF14 and 15, Fairy Fencer F, and one of Square's mobile games, Imperial Saga. And some of the other music was done by Yasunori Nishiki, who worked on the Azure Lane anime, which maybe I'll talk about that eventually, but there are reasons for that. But a lot of his work is also founded more in the games sphere, where he's done music for some of the Bimani games like Reflect Beat, Jubeat, Ubeat, depending on how you pronounce it, Terra Battle 2, Octopath Traveler, and one of Cygame's other games, Princess Connect. So yeah, the music in this show, it's great. It's super good. Obviously a lot of the stuff is, tracks that are used in the game, and that's fine. When Persona 4, the animation was airing, it did the same thing. And, obviously it made sense to do, because that game, I have my things to say about that game, but the music, again, is great. So if you're looking for a good soundtrack, I mean, Granblue's got your back. It's got your back super, super hard. It'll be there for you.
Is it like a remix of the tunes from the first season, or is there some new stuff in there as well?
Obviously there's some reused songs, but there is new stuff that came into play as well. So
cool.
The director of this season is one Yui Umemoto, who their big directing claim to fame is a lot of Card Fight Vanguard, like 4 or 5 different series worth. And they did some episode direction on Banana Fish, Durarara, Garo Vanishing Line, Kids on the Slope, and a couple different seasons of Natsume's Book of Friends. So, it's still, you say what you will about Banana Fish, that's still, a pretty solid resume.
Definitely. And I mean, hey, Banana Fish, we brag on it a lot, but it still had its great moments. Like, it was occasionally a really, really good show. It just, like, the way it wrapped up was so incredibly unsatisfying that it colors the show in a bad light in retrospect. So, just to make that clear again.
I mean, a lot of the character interactions and stuff, too, and the hyper cartoonish villains.
Yeah, I guess.
Which, make no mistake, this show we're talking about now has its share of cartoonish villains with fucking General Furious just being like, one of the short little potato character, and having his big Napoleonic complex because why not? But,
every fantasy universe needs their megalomaniacal Lalafelds, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a trope.
Yes, but it helps, I guess, set the character. It helps set them in that role, so you know what to expect from them. But yeah, this show, it was I guess a fine continuation of the story. Not having played this far in the game, I feel like it's kind of difficult for me to comment on super heavily. There was a moment later. Well, this season covered 3 main arcs. The one at Albion Citadel, where Catalina is reunited with her former classmate Vera, and it turns out the Albion Citadel is just like this. In this neutral territory, they're a military academy. Vera is stationed there because she's formed a pact with the primal that inhabits the island called Luminera, and because of that pact, she is bound to stay there. And when Catalina ends up showing up again, I guess we could say emotions start to run high, and it turns out that Vera is more than a little resentful, and the yandere side starts to come out more than a little bit. Yes, and it's a bad scene for everyone involved, really. Our main crew and the Imperials alike both have to kind of deal with that. After that is an arc with the Mist-Shrouded Isle and one of the primals, Celeste, which is like this giant ghost airship that it's super cool in concept, because it's like this ghastly looking airship that's like falling to pieces, and like the front of it, the bow of it is like falling apart, so it makes like this gaping mouth where it just like eats stuff up in these bright purple evil looking eyes.
So the primals are basically the same thing here that they are in Final Fantasy XIV, I guess? Old gods?
More or less, yeah.
Okay.
I guess they probably just chose that name in the localization so it was like familiar, because, obviously it's in the zeitgeist now because of FF14.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it works, and it's a cool term. Yeah.
So, and this Mist-Shrouded Isle is inhabited with all sorts of undead. Not like, eat your brain, zombies undead, just, they are undead. And they are kept alive on this island by the existence of Celeste.
Okay.
And there they meet this, maybe she's a ghost, maybe she's not, character named Fairy. And they have that story arc there. I want to talk about, the arcs, but keep away from the specifics, because I think, there's some interesting parts of the story to be had there.
I mean, this is a second season review, so for all intents and purposes, you can spoil away. If people don't want to know anything about this, they can just listen to the first season review and decide if that's something for them. But, it's your decision. I'm just saying, you don't have to hold back necessarily. If there's something plot specific you deem interesting, you would like to talk about, just feel free to do so.
I mean, I think it's
worth experiencing.
Yeah, I think it's worth watching, because, the story setup is the individual, mini stories that they tell throughout the game and the show are interesting enough on their own. And mostly because trying to describe this series' myriad cast would be a task that would probably take several hours.
Original Granblue Fantasy is a gacha game, right?
Yes,
that makes sense that there are so many characters.
I think there's, including because when you pull a character, you get that character has an elemental affinity. There's other variants of said characters with different elemental affinities.
Yes, of course.
So you can pull the same character multiple
also gold
times.
Versions, probably platinum versions, silver versions, dark versions, I assume.
I mean more like, fire, wind, water, earth.
Yeah, no, I mean aside from that.
Yes, because you got your 3-star, that's cute. Excuse me, rare, S rare, and SS rare. I'm sorry.
So let's try to separate it a bit from the from the actual game that it came from in itself as a story. Do you feel like the second season is a good continuation of the first one? Is there some character development that is engaging? Is the plot progressed fast or progressed at a at a good pace, so that it keeps you engaged? Like,
yeah, I feel like they keep it going at a pretty sharp click to keep you, wanting to continue. Mostly because each arc is usually like a specific character story and like fleshing out their background and wanting to know more about them. Like the last story in season 2 about Galonzo Island talks a lot about one of the crew members, Rackham, and his ties to another character, Noah, and how he wanted to become a Skyfarer and how he got the Grand Cipher and all of those sorts of things. So it's a neat little story. It's kind of hard to say whether or not the main character has any growth, the main character Gran, mostly because he, or in the case of the female main character Jita, have real growth because they're just there to be an avatar for the player, which is, it's hard to do something like that, especially when this character is supposed to be you. It's supposed to be a self-insert, but there's another show airing right now that we're probably going to talk about in the next go around, where they kind of are doing that decently well. But in this show, it's just kind of like, whatever, I guess Gran's there, and, he's there to help drive the story forward because he's you. That's you on the screen.
But he doesn't really have any real, I don't know, interesting background or real agency himself, aside from being like the catalyst for a lot of the important plot moments, I guess.
I mean, not yet. I guess I think there's some stuff later on in the game, at least, where you end up going back to his hometown, because a lot of this revolves around Gran trying to find his father and become, big bad awesome Skyfarer like him, which obviously is something we've seen before.
Sure.
But how, I don't know exactly how that plays out, because I'm like 10% into the plot of the game. Oops.
Yes. And it's also kind of a I don't know, loose, unspecified goal that they can drag out forever without resolving it.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's
that is the problem with it being a live service game, is that they can keep adding story onto it, which is cool, but trying to catch up to it or trying to have it be resolved is like, when is that gonna happen?
Yeah, that's also always my problem with these kind of games, and MMOs too. I mean, I like how Final Fantasy XIV handles it to an extent, but still, there's like, just fucking tell one finished off story instead of just fucking piling on and on and on this stuff. Just end it and do a new game. I don't.
Hey, do you remember that character from 3 expansions ago?
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine it to be super hard if you have a self-insert character that is not really an existing character and trying to turn that into an actual person in a series that has an actual narrative and everything, where, you need the main character to be a person instead of a fucking blank slate. But, considering, a lot of games do it, I don't know how Granblue does it, but, Persona, the main character, you have the choice between a number of, text, voice responses, whatever. And when you adapt that character, you just have to decide on one single way that character acts and just basically choose your voice lines or text lines from the game accordingly, I would imagine. So,
I mean, they had fun with it in the Persona 4 anime, though, because they sort of had Narukami's reactions and his demeanor change bit by bit over the course of the story. Okay. And during the the bumpers when they were like going to and from commercials. They would show that like personality graph thing that you would see in the game. And you would see the arrows just slowly starting to move outward, which was really neat.
That's clever.
And they took it a step further with the adaptation of Golden, because they showed that personality graph in the intro sequence with everything filled in. So it's like, oh, so this is New Game Plus. Got it. Which was really cute, I thought.
I would have liked to check out the adaptation of Persona 5, but it looked like ass, and yeah. So I never did.
Yeah, I heard that sort of went downhill real quick.
Yeah, so again, and I'll get more Persona 5. Anyway, soon.
So I will play that game this year, I promise.
Yeah, time to play through it for me, like for the third time at least, if not the fourth time after that. I don't know if I'll be able to do all the social link stuff in my first run through this time. I mean, I know some shortcuts, but still. All right. I mean, why not? It's now one of my favorite RPGs of all time, so I have no reason not to, I guess. But yeah, back to Granblue. There's a bunch of Granblue stuff coming besides the main game. Like you mentioned, Granblue Versus is coming up. I'm really interested in that because it's developed by Arxis, and it looks really cool. And there's also
beta played really well, so I'm looking forward to it.
Great. I'm definitely going to get that. And there's also that action RPG thing that Platinum was working on for a while at least.
Yeah, Relink.
Yeah, Relink, that could also be really cool. So I wonder, do you think that this anime is a really good way to get acquainted with the world? Would you say you should rather go with the gacha game? Would you say maybe there's a story summary in Granblue Versus? Maybe the Platinum thing is the better thing, a Relink? In terms of time investment, in terms of how well the story is realized, how entertaining it is, like, you know, all that stuff. Like, how big do you think the merit of this anime adaptation is when it comes to actually getting into this world?
I feel like it lays the foundation really well because it gives you the setup and it introduces you to a whole ton of characters, like so many. So I feel like as a primer for getting into the world of Granblue, the anime is fine. You know, it's probably not the top best produced show in existence, but you know, it serves its purpose, you know, to build interest, to tell the story in a different medium, to introduce people who have not played the game and don't want to invest that time into it. Which, you know, depending on how you want to look at it, if you want to put the time into the game, how long that takes you to get through the first 28 chapters of the game, you know, I don't know offhand, compared to sitting down for maybe 6-ish hours to watch the 24 episodes of the show.
Yeah, you know, anime are always, well, unless you start watching One Piece, less of a time investment than video games usually.
Unless you watch Paced One Piece. Does that still exist?
I don't know, actually. That would be interesting. I mean, I'm still holding out hope for eventually getting the One Piece Kai version of the story, because I definitely prefer the animated version again over the manga version, even with all its flaws. But yeah, still so, I would really like to have an abridged version of that is, hey, what's Team 4-Star been up to recently?
You can talk to them.
I mean, come on. If they want to do a big project that has an almost unlimited number of material to work with, there you go. Holy shit, we're nearing the 1,000 episode mark or something at this point. So,
oh my god.
Yeah, well, let me check actually. This is just for funsies. The newest One Piece episode is episode 919, people. So there you go. Yeah, Team 4-Star, get on it.
That's like, God, Detective Conan has to be running for about as long.
Yeah, I think so. And that's still running. So yeah, they're probably covered equal ground at this point.
Mm.
But yeah, you know, Granblue sounds like it's a comparably easy thing to get into. But would you say that people should stop after the first season because the second one is maybe not living up to what the setup the first season built, and the art style and everything not being as faithful? Or would you say the story in the second season is interesting enough, like the characters are evolved and developed interestingly enough, and the plot progresses as in an interesting way, so that it's worth continuing after the first season?
I mean, I guess my gripes with the style are just my personal taste sort of informing my opinion. I don't think it's a bad thing if you want to keep watching after the first season. I mean, you have to be prepared for a shift in how it's going to look, but the execution and the development that they give the characters in the second season is it's not insignificant. It's interesting, and we get to know some neat things about them. Like, I had zero idea besides running away from the Empire to protect Lyria, what Catalina's deal exactly was. And then we go to Albion and we see, oh man, you and your totally not girlfriend had some issues to work out, and it plays out, in a pretty interesting way. So, and a lot of the other character stories, like I mentioned Rackham earlier, was pretty cool. I guess there's one part during the Galonzo Island story where a couple of mutual friends of ours were like, yeah, this definitely didn't happen this way in the game. And I was like, okay, noted that what happened in the game wasn't as cool as what happened in the show. Gotcha.
Well, is it actually that? Like, is it better in the show than...
I thought they made it a bit more interesting, because if it was... I don't know exactly how it plays out in the game, but in the show it was like, oh, we angered one of the old gods, and now it's taking on this form that was like pretty much dwarfing the island and threatening to wipe it out. If y'all are interested in watching it, I don't want to give away what exactly it is, but it was pretty wild to behold. And as far as the CG goes, it's probably one of the best looking things in this show, because this both seasons of this show used CG to varying degrees. I kind of feel like maybe in the second season it was maybe slightly better, but it's hard to say one way or the other, because we have both gone on and on and on about how anime CG is a very on again, off again sort of thing for us. But
it's putting it mildly.
Yes.
It's mostly off.
Yes.
Mostly off.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, I feel like the use of it in this show as a whole was fine. It wasn't anything really off-putting, I feel like. So
that's good.
If it didn't really deter me from anything, on that front. It's like, oh, this is CG, looks all right. That's the sort of feeling I had. That looks fine.
And Mappa has put out good CG stuff before. Like the stuff in Garo is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I can think of right now. I can think of a bad example too. Like Inuyashiki didn't look great. So yeah, I think they're, and yeah. So, I mean, it always depends on who is responsible for it, I guess.
Mm.
So it's nice that it's good in Granblue.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I feel like it's probably not for everyone, because I think a lot of people on the outside will be like, oh, it's generic fantasy. And I mean, yeah, it ticks a lot of those boxes, the whole, oh, there's an evil empire, we have to stop them, sort of fantasy thing that's in, let's crunch the numbers, 95% of our JRPGs. But, there's some neat character moments sprinkled throughout. And if you can put aside, the shift in design in the second season, I still think as a whole is perfectly enjoyable as it is. It tells, a decently competent story with some cool characters. And, if that strikes your fancy, you can check it out on Crunchyroll and High Dive.
3,700 years after a mysterious flash of light petrified the human population, a teenage science genius named Senku revives to find himself in a world where all traces of human civilization have been eroded by time. After figuring out the mysteries behind his sudden revival, Senku also frees his longtime friend since childhood Taiju and their classmate Yuzuriha from their stony shells to rebuild human civilization. But to accomplish his grand goal of kickstarting and quick-routing the scientific and societal achievements humanity has gained over thousands of years, Senku realizes he needs more powerful helpers. So, he revives martial artist Tsukasa, which turns out to be Senku's first and biggest mistake. Tsukasa, grateful for his revival, but also enamored with the simplicity and blunt fairness of an uncivilized world without sin, decides to oppose Senku's intent of reviving all of humanity and resolves to create a new world, free from the old generation's corruption. After escaping Tsukasa's grasp, Senku finds himself in the company of Kohaku, the member of a primitive civilization that seems to have no precise knowledge of the history of the world. After following her to her village, Senku, together with Kohaku, the resident science adept to be, Chrome, and an ever-increasing number of other friendly helpers, starts laying the groundwork for building his kingdom of science. But Tsukasa has not been slacking off either. Using the knowledge and resources necessary to revive petrified humans as well, he is building a giant army consisting of hand-picked warriors willing to share his ideals and serving as the foundation for his empire of might. Senku's and Tsukasa's ideologies are bound to clash on the battlefield sooner or later, but who will ultimately prevail? The sophisticated brute or the mad scientist? Dr. Stone is based on a manga written by Riichiro Inagaki and drawn by Boichi. Besides Dr. Stone, Inagaki has also written iShield 21, which is one of the few sports anime you have checked out, John, I believe.
Yeah, it's been a minute, but yeah.
How did you like it?
I enjoyed iShield 21. I mean, there's not a whole lot of sports anime that I get super into, and I always kind of liked football, or American football, that is to say. So, I watched iShield 21 for a while, and I really enjoyed it. I don't know if I ever finished it. I should maybe look back into that at some point.
Yeah, I was always interested to checking that out too, because, I know bullshit about American football, so depending on how faithful that, that can vary from sports anime to sports anime, but, that could actually make it entertaining. And also, I think at least the manga was drawn by Murata, the guy who...
Yeah, it was. Yusuke Murata.
Yusuke Murata, right, yeah. And I love his artwork, so I might at least read the manga maybe. I don't know how faithful the anime adaptation was in that for that in regards to his artwork. But yeah, speaking of artwork, Boichi, on the other hand, who is Korean, by the way, has also drawn Ragia, the New Book of Revelation, Sunken Rock, and Trigun Multiple Bullets. I think I checked out Multiple Bullets, but it's been a while. And the manga for Dr. Stone started in March 2017, is still running and counts 13 volumes at this point. The anime adaptation started airing in July last year, and the first season ran for 24 episodes. The second season, with probably the same number of episodes, has already been confirmed. And the animation was done by TMS, or Tokyo Movie Shinsha, which we have already mentioned several times on our little show. They are responsible for Lupin III, Detective Conan, Yowamushi Paddle, and the last thing we reviewed of theirs was Fruits Basket. And the presentation in Dr. Stone is solid, I would say. The design work...
would you say rock solid?
God damn you. Yes, I would. The design work adaptation from Boichi's original art is unusual, but striking. Like, he has a very distinctive art style that maybe takes some time getting used to for some viewers. The environments are lush and colorful, and since the focus is on the scientific developments, the show doesn't need to have that many flashy action scenes. There are definitely some fight scenes, but even those are more about who can use the better tools than who's the better fighter or has superpower like in other shonen anime. So don't expect any big Sakuga moments like in a bunch of other shonen shows like My Hero Academia or Demon Slayer. That's not what this show is really about. So yeah, what is this show actually about?
Why don't you tell us?
Yeah, like I already established in the summary, Senku wants to superstart human evolution again, to go through all stages of civilization, scientific progress, and technical achievements in the shortest amount of time possible, and to get humanity back to where it was about 3,700 years ago, with a few improvements here and there, maybe. In the show, it's now actually the year 5,738, by the way, I think. That's what I got written down. Tsukasa, on the other hand, says the old world and old world order had their chance, like the dinosaurs. He considers our current world, like that you and I live in currently, a dystopia where the rich old assholes feed on the young and impoverished. Yeah, that's what I thought. He sees the petrification as a chance for a full reset and the possibility of a fair and just world that doesn't waste its resources because it developed too far for its own good. And just looking
He's not wrong.
Yeah, just looking at the state our world is in today, his approach makes at least some sense. It's definitely understandable, and that's why he is a good antagonist. His motivation and goals are very relatable, and depending on how you look at it, maybe even better to an extent than Senku's undying trust in a better world through the power of science, and, the need for more people who trust in science potential. So we have an interesting hero and villain, and the rest of the first season is basically Senku gathering people from the village, willing to help him make science shit, necessary to cure Kohaku's sister from an illness that cannot be cured with this stone world's current level of civilization. Turns out he needs to make an antibiotic, which is easier said than done in this environment. But thankfully, Senku is an absolute super genius who knows literally all scientific achievements ever and also knows how to reproduce them with the most archaic methods. There's a bunch of stuff that he comes up with that stretches the suspense of disbelief quite a bit. The show does a really good job at selling us on the possibility of actually being able to build the stuff he does with the right people, the right methods, the right materials, and a lot of patience. And even though Senku takes a lot of shortcuts, it still takes them about half a year to gather and develop all the things necessary to cook up the antibiotic. So the show is at least trying to stay somewhat realistic in that regard. Now, on the surface, just watching a guy coming up with a primitive way of creating things like glass flasks, antibiotics, or generators might sound a bit boring, but this is anime. And anime has a habit of making the most mundane things look super ridiculous and exciting. And the presentation in Dr. Stone goes a long way to get you engaged in the most basic scientific discoveries. First, in terms of visuals, the whole show has a very fun educational program, after-school program vibe to it, I guess. Like, we get colorful, cartoony roadmaps for all the scientific achievements, and every time the crew successfully builds or creates a new tool or gadget or item, you get this JRPG-esque window saying, acquired so-and-so. Yeah,
excellent.
With 8-bit graphics or 16-bit graphics included, all that good shit. The series visually and story-wise also frames tiny scientific advancements like a light bulb, for example, as one of the most amazing, mind-dazzling things. Like, it lets you rediscover an appreciation for all the big and small scientific achievements humanity has gained throughout history. And some of the scientific developments are staged so well that they get you really excited along with the characters, especially the characters who see them for the first time, and lets you understand the basic attraction of working in applied science. Senku also sometimes turns into a robot when explaining things, just, for shits and giggles. He's not actually turning into a robot, but, as a visual thing. There are a lot of jokes, slapstick humor, science gags, overreactions that are funny because they're creative and not just loud. Some really funny caricature-style faces and bodies for comedic moments, like Boichi's designs are very versatile and lend themselves well to this kind of comedy. The show also does a really good job at making us remember how powerful and scary nature can be when the team tries to gather sulfuric acid, for example. Like, they show the acid cloud basically as this two-faced goddess that turns into a horrible ghoul in the blink of an eye. And primitive humans might really have treated something like toxic gas as a hidden cursed demonic force because they didn't know better and didn't understand it. While, people were dying out of nowhere because, that gas is invisible. It just smells funny. So it's a fun idea to visualize it that way and, convey the basic idea of science having this supernatural aura to people who just are not familiar to it. The soundtrack is also fantastic. Aside from 2 amazing OPs, it's apparently done by 3 people. First, there's Hiroaki Tsutsumi, who, among other things, also did the music for Orange, Ahiru no Sora, which is airing right now, and a bunch of other things. There's also Yuki Kanesaka, who was responsible for the vocal insert songs in this and Blood Blockade Battlefront and Beyond. And last but definitely not least, there's Tatsuya Kato, who we have mentioned many times before on the show as well, since he did the music for Love Lies Sunshine, Free, Hanebado, and of course Food Wars. So an all-star cast responsible for the music here, and it definitely shows. The soundtrack in general has this nice kind of Celtic feel to it, with certain instrument use that you would maybe hear in that kind of music, but more rockish and, with some additional orchestrations, everything. And just like the visuals, it gets you really excited once our characters get ready to do some sciencey shit. The few fights and action scenes are also underscored really well by riveting orchestrations, but mostly the soundtrack plays into an aspect of the show I didn't expect to find here at all. And those are the emotional moments. I did not expect the show to have that many genuinely heartwarming emotional moments. And the great music does a lot to make them work. But if all the characters weren't so damn charming, they wouldn't hit as well as they do. Senku as a main protagonist sets the bar here because he's just a lot of fun. He's very snarky and isn't afraid to use underhanded methods to get people to do what he needs them to do. But ultimately, he has a good heart, and that is made clear very often throughout the show. Like, in the beginning, when he comes to the village, he does fetch quests to increase his circle of followers and friends, basically. Like, he creates ramen, or a primitive version of ramen, to lure in the hungry people first and make them work for him, for example. And that works out really well, because, they have never eaten something so delicious, I guess. And I also love that the series is very intent on showing that he is not physically fit at all, which is a rarity for shonen main protagonists, who are usually just fucking action piece monster fighters, whatever, everything. And Senku is definitely not that. He is out of breath really fast, has no stamina whatsoever, is physically weak, like he's a twig, and he knows that. So he also knows that he needs the help of a bunch of people with various abilities to compensate for his own shortcomings, which again is very refreshing and sympathetic as well. He also has this catchphrase where he uses the word 10 billion or 10 billion% in completely inappropriate situations, but it's fun. Senku is anime MacGyver, and it is so cool to see him solve problems with old-ass science. And all the other characters are great as well. We don't spend a lot of time with Taiju and Yuzuriha this season, like only the first couple of episodes, and then they and Senku part ways for several reasons. But you definitely get the feeling that Senku and Taiju have been best buds forever. Like, every time they're together, it's super fun, even though they couldn't be more different in terms of personality, aside from both being giant goofballs, of course. There's Kohaku, is a strong main female protagonist who is also an incredibly capable fighter, but also very nice and sympathetic. No tsundere antics to be found anywhere, unless you call her a gorilla, which is understandable. That happens throughout the show, and it's very funny, the way she reacts to that. We have Chrome, who quickly is just as excited about science as Senku is, and has the brainpower to back it up as well. We have the village guards Kinro and Ginro, the old craftsman Kaseki, the mischievous mentalist Gen, and the little curious village girl Suika, who wears a hollowed out melon on her head. Suika is actually, she has one of the best moments when it comes to showing the power of science in a very emotional way. Because she's incredibly short-sighted. So she wears the melon on her head because the two eye holes make her see a bit better since they narrow her field of vision. And once Senku realizes this, he builds her some improvised glasses into the melon mask. And Suika actually being able to properly see like a normal person for the first time in her life is so relatable, so perfectly framed by the visuals, emphasized by the fantastic soundtracks, like so powerful and so moving that I got teary-eyed. I mean, it's such a simple thing, but to that girl, it's like fucking magic that completely changes her life. And the show conveys those emotions fucking perfectly. I loved it. And there are a boatload of moments like this in the show, which I didn't expect to happen. Just science changing people's life for the better and Senku being the catalyst for that. Like I said, I did not expect the show to be so emotionally rewarding, especially in the later parts of the season when we learn about the backstory of the village, which is actually pretty tragic and sad, but has several great payoffs, the biggest one in the final episode of the season. The soundtrack also becomes incredibly moving in that part of the story, and there are some surprising vocal performances that will definitely tug at your heartstrings, especially, again, in the final episode of the season. Yeah, I loved it. I think presentation-wise, even though the animation is not like the Super Sakuga Fest, it all works together really well, and the soundtrack is one of the best soundtracks I have heard in anime in a while when it comes to just highlighting the important moments in the show. I think the only thing I can maybe fault this series for is that up till now it has had an incredibly idealistic attitude towards science. Like, Tsukasa's worldview aside, it glosses over the possible negative aspects, of the many advancements Senku brings to the village, like more waste, for example. And eventually, science is always misused in a way, be it weapons of mass destruction or what have you. Eventually, science is applied in a wrong way. And I wonder if the show will go there. I wonder if this, like, society Psycho builds will advance to a point where things like that can happen or will happen, and how Senku deals with that. I wonder. Because so far it feels like this show is just a giant-ass love letter to science and, how far we've come as a human race in regards to science and everything. And the show trying to teach you about these things in a very kid-friendly way. And I appreciate that. But I wonder if the show can stay that way, especially when it comes to the whole war thing that is looming on the horizon. But yeah, aside from that, I fucking love this show, which I did not expect. Again, when I first saw artwork from the manga and the trailer for the anime, I thought it looked weird. Senku has silly Yu-Gi-Oh hair, but he is a mad scientist, so he should look the part, I guess. But I thought this would be another basic shonen battle anime, only this time set in a Stone Age setting. But so far it has been mostly anything but. There's a small tournament arc, but it lasts like 2 episodes or something, and feels like it's only really in there to mix things up a little and to move the plot along. But yeah, just like Food Wars, Dr. Stone is a creative spin on the standard shonen formula, and depending on how much of a science guy you are, this might be even more engaging, fun, and up your alley than the Shokugekis in Food War. And if you think you are that kind of person, then you should definitely check it out. And everyone else who is into shonen stuff as well, for that matter. It's streaming on Funimation and Crunchyroll, who apparently backed the shit out of that show, by the way. It even has a little Dr. Stone-themed Crunchyroll teaser animation right before each episode. And, I prefer them backing a show like that over something like Shield Hero.
But you love Shield Hero.
No, I don't. Who told you that? I want to punch that person and call him or her a liar.
You did. You told us that.
No! I did not listen to the fucking episode!
You talked about it for so long, though. How could you not love it?
Yeah. I wonder. Why did I talk so long about it, John? I maybe shouldn't have. It didn't deserve my attention for that long. It got it anyway. Because I wanted to tear it a second asshole. Anyway, not like there are not already enough assholes in that show, but you know.
I mean, Crunchyroll was really, really playing this show up, and I guess for good reason, man.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's a big hit, and it's one of the big Shonen Jump franchises right now, right? You had the big 3 things like Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach for a while, and Dragon Ball, but that was much earlier. But then they disappeared one by one. One Piece is still there, but there have been some things, being like trying to be the successors of that. And I guess Dr. Stone is one of them. The other one maybe being Demon Slayer, I don't know, maybe Promised Neverland to an extent. But what's cool is at least Dr. Stone and Promised Neverland are completely different from your standard stuff that Naruto did, that Bleach did, that Dragon Ball did, that One Piece does. You know, they really try to do something different with the standard shonen formula, and I super appreciate that. I'm like, yeah, give me more of those kind of shows. Like, I mean, currently we have one I haven't checked out yet, maybe I should, that is kind of applying the shonen formula to runway modeling, I guess.
Oh, that show, yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to be fun as well. I don't know, if maybe I'll check it out, but that's really not a topic that is anywhere near my field of interest, so maybe not. But Dr. Stone is. Science shit is. Most definitely. Promised Neverland, that kind of, you know, horror story also is definitely. And I hope there are more, you know, uncovered, or at least uncovered by me, Shonen Jump franchises hidden in those pages that will eventually make it to the screen. And that I can enjoy as much as I enjoyed Promised Neverland and Dr. Stone. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the second season of this. I want to see how the Stone Wars between the Kingdom of Science and the Empire of Might check out. Also, at this point, we know a lot about the background of the current world, but we still don't know what or who is responsible for the petrification event all those years ago. So I wonder if we will get filled in on that in season 2. And of course, I'm looking forward to all the crazy primitive science versions of stuff we know and have gotten used to Senku will come up with in the future. Yeah, this was a thoroughly entertaining season of what seems to be a really fun and clever show, and you should definitely give it a chance. I don't think you will regret it. And that is a wrap on the 89th episode of Anime Brain Freeze. All the music in our show is from the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack by the amazing Jake Kaufman. Please go to vrt.bandcamp.com and check out his awesome work. Our show is available on most of the popular podcast services, but it's always worth visiting animebrainfreeze.com for a review index and more. Leave us comments and questions on YouTube, follow us on Twitter at AnyBrainFreeze, or send an email to animebrainfreeze@gmail.com. We would love to read your feedback. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you had a good time, and please join us again on our next episode. Macht's gut.
Take care, everybody. Next time on Anime Brain Freeze.
Dark conspiracies in a false utopia.
And fighting fire with fire, in the most literal sense. So, Stein is German for stone, right?
Yes.
So, if Senku built, like, you know, an archway or a portal or a door of some kind to walk through, would that be Dr. Stein's gate?
I'm gonna...
Thank you, good night!